Hello, my name is Pedro, and this is Catholic Focus. Recently, I asked a young woman in my parish how youth group was going. Her response, it's youthless. Now, I think that this answer characterizes how many of us feel about youth ministry in the church. If it were to be measured by its success, then we could say that we failed, as many adolescents are leaving the church. But can youth ministry or any ministry be measured? And what would we deem as success? Well, this is exactly what Father John Yake has done. His book, The Theory of Religious Ministry to Youth, offers a tested and theoretically sound approach to the evangelization of youth. So I'm sitting here with Father John Yake. He is the chaplain at St. Thomas Villanova College in King City. Welcome, Father.
Hi.
So let's just cut to the chase. We got the book. It's like 400 pages long.
Almost 5, actually.
It's very complete. How does someone come up with all these ideas?
Well, it started actually, I was, I think, less than 3 months ordained.
Really?
And yeah, Father Stan McDonnell, he came to my office and asked if I would involve myself in a core retreat, Christ and Others retreat.
Right.
So I went, and I was really impressed with the reaction of teenagers.
Right.
It was their reaction, because I never see that anywhere else.
So the reaction that was positive.
Oh, their enthusiasm,
Right.
the joy, everything you should expect from the Christian gospel was there.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't seen it anywhere else, and I had been quite active in the church since I was a teenager, whether it was in scouting or with
Right.
altar servers or with, as a young person myself, I involved myself in everything that was out there with youth, but I hadn't seen anything as electrifying as this.
And so you continued being involved with core,
Yes.
knowing that that's where it was at. Did you feel that there was something lacking then? Once you had the core experience, did you feel that there was something lacking in the rest of the church, or how the church
Well,
was?
there wasn't this reaction. You could see right away that the needs of young people were not adolescents and teenagers were not being met in the regular practice of the parish or
So-
even the school, actually.
So how does that experience translate into this theory?
Oh, well, I thought I would bring my experience to the university
Right.
to bring some disciplined study of what's going on here, because I thought whatever's going on here with this retreat, we need it. The church needs it. Young people are telling us this is what we want.
So you thought that if you could come up with a method or
Yes.
a theory
Yeah.
that would scientifically kind of show what
Yeah.
was happening at core, that people could replicate that.
Well, I thought that youth ministry generally, and core for sure, was on the periphery of school life, of parish life. It was sort of out there for the sort of weird people, because the reaction
Yeah.
was something like in Acts of the Apostles
Yeah,
after
yeah.
the Pentecost. They must have got new wine. Like they suspect the work of the Spirit is bizarre looking. But anyway, I went to the university and I went to Regis, and they told me that I'd have to do a doctorate to do what I wanted, because what I was looking for didn't exist in anything that was there,
Okay.
which is really to define youth ministry and to study youth ministry.
So you did your PhD
Well,
in
Doctor of Ministry,
your
actually.
doctorate of ministry in youth ministry, or in?
Yeah, in youth. Youth was my part of it.
Okay, so can you explain maybe just briefly the theory?
Yes, I can.
Just
Ooh.
briefly, because we're going to come back to it. But
Sure. Okay, well, I mentioned actually the book is dedicated to Lorna Bowman,
Okay.
Professor Bowman, because she was my thesis director. And in our conversations, in terms of what I was trying to do, she mentioned James Fowler. I never heard of him.
Okay.
And so I investigated him. He wasn't actually taught at the University of Toronto at all. I think I'm the only
No.
one even now teaching him.
Okay.
So I found in him a means to have core intersect scientifically, because what he's done with his faith development theory, he located in people like Jean Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg and Erik Erikson stage theory. He discovered stage theory in psychology. And he developed what we now call faith development theory, which is stage theory. There's 6 stages of faith.
Of faith.
So the 3rd stage is the synthetic conventional stage.
Which is the stage where
Adolescence.
most adolescents are.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people probably stay in that stage.
Yes, he found
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yes, most people do.
Okay, so hold on. So you were reading Fowler's stages in faith development,
Yeah.
and you thought, hey, this is exactly what's happening.
Well, not quite. There's another step.
Okay.
The stage is made up of 9 or 7 aspects of faith. And it's these aspects which can give us, these are the minute details of human psychology
Okay.
wherein we connect with meaning. Like we hold meaning, we're meaning makers. We hold meaning and in psychological compartments. And there's certain ways, like we know how conversion happens psychologically. We know how people are changed. So we can be aware of that. Like I always say that, you know, God is a mystery, but ministry isn't. Ministry is very scientific because we're talking to human beings, we're relating to human beings, and we can understand how that works.
Right.
So Romney Moseley, who was one of the authors with Fowler of the Faith Development Research Instrument, which is a scientific, it's an interview in which you can actually find out a person's stage of faith.
Okay, yeah.
So I used it, I tested a core retreat for my doctoral research, right? And I used, according to Moseley, he told me how I can use this research instrument to find out if people are actually moved in their faith by this retreat and how they're moved.
So it involved interviews with people that had been through CORE.
Exactly.
And this is in fact probably a good place to stop briefly, because we've spoken to some of these people, and here are some of their comments of their experiences with CORE.
Christ and Others Retreat, or CORE, is a retreat that's held for kids from the ages of 17 to 21. And it goes from Friday till Sunday, and it has a lot of meaning for a lot of people. I did my first CORE over 20 years ago, and at the time, my boyfriend, who is now my husband, dragged me kicking and screaming to it. I had been away from the church for over 10 years at that point, and I felt that I didn't belong at something like that. So I went really only to please Sean, my husband.
I got involved in that CORE because of Father John Yake. He had asked me to help out on the weekend. I did and got a lot out of it.
It turned out that it was the best thing I had ever done in my life. I was on a sort of a self-destructive track, and when I came out of the weekend, I had a new path to take, and I started following it. It brought me closer to God, and I've used my faith. It has sustained me ever since. Even sometimes just the memory of that weekend for me will get me through some hard times.
What I got out of the weekend was a greater sense of myself and more comfortable with myself and with my friends and peers.
The one thing that I've drawn from that weekend that helps me through to now is an awareness that I want to have a relationship with God, and that it is constantly being renewed and rediscovered, I think. We have been involved in many COREs since that first one.
You get a tremendous feeling of being spiritually renewed when you help out on the weekend and see the difference that it makes in a young person's life.
If you talk to people who have done CORE, no matter how many years have passed, they can recall those feelings so easily when they remember it. And it just doesn't leave you. It stays with you.
So how typical is what these people are saying about their experience to what everybody else is saying about CORE, based on your interviews?
Well, I hear it all the time. It's the same story. Every young person who goes on this retreat will access these gains to the degree I can't tell you.
Okay.
Because that depends on their life and what's happened to them and so forth. But you're guaranteed that everyone who does CORE is moved in these aspects of faith in the same way.
Okay.
And I hear this story over and over again.
Okay.
So in my work, I found not only how they're moved psychosocially, because they're human beings, but also how they're moved theologically.
Okay.
Because I use Fowler only to a certain extent. Because Fowler is interested in faith development, but faith for him is a generic thing. It's meaning making. Like your faith could be in baseball. Your faith could be money. It doesn't have to be God.
No.
But I'm not interested that your faith is moved to where you want it to go. I'm interested in whether you're being evangelized.
Oh, okay.
And that's the difference. Whether CORE is evangelizing young people, I'm not really interested in their psychosocial changes in these scientific constructs. And this is where this guy named Craig Dykstra took umbrage at Fowler and said, well, I don't, What faith is your participation in God's mission, in what Jesus has told us and what Jesus is doing. That's really what your faith is.
Okay.
He doesn't care if you're making meaning or not. So I had to take Fowler only so far, then I had to drop him. And I had to move on to, are they being evangelized?
Right.
So I had to look at the interview from an evangelizing perspective.
So evangelizing being, that's a measure of your success? If these people are being evangelized, then core is working?
Yeah. Do they have a personal relationship with Jesus? This is what Pope John Paul the Great meant by evangelization.
Yeah, okay.
So you're not trying to catechize them. Core is not like challenge retreat, like Curcio, that kind of thing is trying to catechize.
Yeah.
From the Greek catechese meaning to echo the tradition. So we're not interested. Core is an experience of Christian living. You did it yourself.
Yeah,
you know what it's like.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So wait. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just continue. Well, why does it work? What are the aspects of core that make for effective evangelization?
Okay. Well, that's really getting into the nuts and
Yeah,
bolts
let's
of it
do
all.
it. Let's do it.
Well, I call the theory youth ministry theory because I wasn't creative enough to think of a better name. And it consists of 5 principles. And each one is scientific. I think that's the contribution that my book is making to the conversation around youth ministry, is that it is science.
Yeah.
It's not playing games with young people. Actually, my introduction, I discount what ministry is not.
Yes.
Because what I've seen that's out there, that's not working, I think we have to first realize that we're not really evangelizing them by having them go through what I call religious activities. That I think youth ministry is really surrounded by assumptions. There's an assumptive universe that if we take young people downtown to feed the poor, they'll learn.
Yes.
They'll learn to be compassionate. They'll learn. But this is all an assumption. Nobody's really tested to follow these people for years after and see if they really continue that. You know. But so my theory is 5 principles.
Yeah.
And if you have to have all 5 working at the same time.
At the same time.
You can't have 4 out of 5 or 2 out of 5. It has to be 5 out of 5.
Okay.
And that's what's on the cover. One of our teachers, Jim Wagner, he's a cartoonist, and he put my theory on the cover in a stylistic way. And it's sort of the roots of a tree, and there's these 5 ovals, and that's the principles. That you don't get a tree if you don't. The foundation has to be there, or you don't get the tree.
Okay.
But anyway, the first one is from Fowler. Principle 1 is from Fowler, and that's to engage adolescents in effective evangelizing issues. So they are, very quickly, relationships, belonging, decision making, having a philosophy of life that for yourself, something to guide you, and what are your important things? What are your treasures? What are the things that really it expresses your deepest self?
Okay.
That's what they're looking for, your deepest self. So that's principle number 1. So don't moralize with teenagers. Don't raise issues in your preaching or your teaching or retreats that aren't any of those 5, because you're wasting your time. This is what they're looking for. This is where their growing edge in their psychosocial life.
Yeah.
The second evangelizing issue is to employ youth-appropriate evangelizing structures. So socially, this is from Erickson actually, he saw that teenagers escape, it's called distancing. They move away from the adult world to be with each other because they see that adults are obstacles to their emerging into adulthood.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying to the church is use that natural structure that teenagers want anyway, because all core does. I think adults on core are invisible.
Yeah.
All we do is we create the structure that they're desperate to create. So they love it. They get in there and think, oh, this is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And they're letting us do it. So we become invisible, I think.
So the second principle is about structure.
Structures, yeah. Social structures that teens find enjoyable. And the third one is call forth those who are gifted evangelizers. That too often I think pastors accept anybody who volunteers.
Right.
And with this assumption, particularly if the person is young, that they can evangelize. And so I found that the idea is not just let volunteers come, but call forth, discern the gifts of adults who can be with teenagers. And there's a certain, that's a gift. There's a certain adults who can and certain adults who can't.
Okay.
The fourth one is use evangelizing program styles. And this is broken down in the book in detail, but basically the general gist of it is connected in a word called dialogue. In conversations, there's 2 things, listening and speaking.
And listening.
The most powerful one is the listening.
Listening, yes.
So it's very powerful for them because you're not an adult now. You've somehow been accepted, but now you have the skill of of knowing the faith, and you can then raise issues of faith within that context, rather than start at a book, in a textbook, and start at chapter 1 and force them to do that.
Okay.
And the last one, I illustrate in the book with Jean Vanier, because his work with the handicapped and so forth in large communities, that the spirit, you have to maintain always the spirit of evangelization. That whenever Jesus was with anyone, whether sinner or whoever it was, even somebody he would normally hate and really aggravated him, he loved them, even loved his people who were torturing him to death. So teenagers will test us, because acceptance, according to Erickson, is their thing. Because when you're a child, you're accepted because you obey, you're a good boy, good girl. And that's also Kohlberg's morality thing. But now they want to, do you accept me for who I am, my differences? So you have to maintain that acceptance all the time. As soon as they see that you have an agenda for them to comply with, you now become a burden to them.
And they'll know right away.
They know right away.
They know right away.
So in core, that's why core is so informal, and whatever people say, the adults don't even blink. And that's how they tell us everything. I mean, you saw it yourself. I mean, stuff that they.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's certainly a sense that young people feel that they belong and that nobody's judging them and that they can be themselves, and that leads to.
Yes, ministry.
To ministry.
And that's why in chapter 8 I talk about what ministry today has to be. It has to be healing ministry. Because I do in chapters 2 and 8, I do a cultural analysis and a social analysis traced all the way from the Enlightenment to show really what teenagers are suffering today.
Okay, this is really good. But I want to use something else. There's another event that a lot of people now, particularly nowadays, like we're the World Youth Day generation, the Pope John Paul II generation. So we're all familiar with World Youth Day, and I want to maybe pick your brain a little bit when we come back as to how some of these principles actually apply to World Youth Day, and maybe that's one of the reasons why World Youth Day works.
The phenomenon of World Youth Days is one of the most important tools of evangelization given to us by Pope John Paul II, and it contains within itself the key elements for any pastoral ministry with young people and with young adults. The first aspect is taking people out of a solitude and letting them experience a profound reality of communion, of unity. Many people suffer from solitude. The World Youth Day helps people to realize they're not alone. Secondly, the whole teaching aspect, which runs through the World Youth Day, built around a biblical theme, which then gives way to the catecheses, is a very important tool. Any youth ministry or young adult ministry that is not grounded or rooted in the scriptures is not authentic. Thirdly, popular piety and devotion, which is a very key element of World Youth Days. I think of the Stations of the Cross in Toronto, the whole devotion surrounding the passage of the World Youth Day cross, adoration of the Eucharist, and also the saints, the importance of the saints. The next aspect is a very key element that we developed in Toronto of social justice. That authentic social justice is intrinsic to the Christian life. It's how we put the gospel into practice. But it must be rooted in the gospel. It's not merely social work, but it's a gesture that comes forth from the heart once we have focused on Jesus' mission in the New Testament. And the final aspect of World Youth Day is the aspect of commissioning. That we gather together, we experience these things to be sent forth. We go out to be salt and light. We go out to be the saints of the new millennium. We go out to be like the Magi in seeking Christ and following his light. When these key elements are present in pastoral ministry with young people, I think we can have some degree of certainty that there is a formation that's being given.
Okay, so if success is people are still involved in youth ministry, let's say. You get a lot of young people that went to World Youth Day, they came back, now they're youth ministers or they're permanent deacons.
Or in the high school, they work with chaplaincy.
Yeah, exactly. They have a lot of chaplains. So is that your sense? Is it then your sense from what you know, what you've written, that World Youth Day has these 5 principles?
Yes. I find that the young people are always demanding core. That even though we have them involved in other things, if you don't have core as the focus, it just seems to not go anywhere. Core seems to be the initiation into an evangelizing activity.
Okay.
Then I saw with World Youth Day, particularly when I was here in Toronto, close up and personal, and when I was doing hearing confessions there, I could hear my theory when the people were talking to me.
Right.
So and I looked at it. I don't do too much. I conclude the book with it's called How World Youth Day Works, but I can only invite the reader to to explore, take my theory into their own experience and look at it. But I do show how all the elements, all the features of youth ministry theory are there. And I think Pope John Paul the Great saw that. He's worked with youth since he was a young priest. And he like nobody had before me really investigated it using Fowler. Fowler was the one who opened the door to enable it to be studied.
Right.
But I think he always cottoned on to it. I think he knew it. You know, he knew the theory. He practiced it. And in a sense, people are good teachers and good preachers, so they practice it anyway. They just know it. But this way it's been articulated and youth ministry has been defined.
So is your sense that, because you're not saying that the church does not know how to do youth ministry. You're basically saying that good youth ministry has been happening. It's just that now it's proven scientifically. We know what works. This is a good method.
We can articulate it, and we can understand what we're doing, and what is working and what's not working.
Okay.
Like in CORE, one of my jobs as spiritual director is I have to admit or demit adults. Some adults really want to do it, but I see by the reaction of the youth that Principle 5 is not working with this one.
Right.
They don't have it, so I have to cut them. I can't really talk to them about it unless they ask me. But I have to. My job is to make sure that they have the experience of evangelizing experience, and that's tough. But just because you want to do this, you may not have the gift to do it. And in my book, I think I'm pretty universal in terms of the gifts, because I cite St. Paul, and in the early church, everybody was gifted. They knew that everybody has a gift. The only stipulation I make in the book is I differentiate between evangelizing personalities and ideological personalities.
Right.
That's all I do.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe last point, because I know it's important that to understand that the book is science, it's theory. I had a really hard time reading it.
Good.
I did. Good. And I sense that most people like me, youth ministers, will have a hard time. So what do we tell them? I don't want to scare people. It's like, don't read the book, because maybe people will, be able to understand the book and embrace it. What do we tell those people?
Well,
What's this book for?
I think it's for everybody. I think it's quite user-friendly once you get into it, once you see what I'm doing. Because I'm not all that smart myself. I'm just articulating experience. It starts with experience. I start with experience of ministry with youth, and here's where it intersects with Fowler, and here's what comes of it. I mean, if you're interested in the scientists, they're there. But if you delete that when you're reading it, just read. It's a good. It's just a read. Yeah, it's just a read. But I think what has to happen though in youth ministry is that the church needs to be serious about it. Not that they're not serious about it, but be serious in a sense that you have to have skills for this ministry.
Yes.
You would never let someone go to the hospital, work with the dying and palliative care without taking a CPE course or something like that. I mean, we're letting people do ministry with youth who have no theological education, no gifts that are proven. And so I'm laying out, here's what it is, here's what you need, here's the criterion that makes a ministry, and takes the guesswork out of it. Yeah. All the questions that people are asking, and what should we do with youth and what's really working, if you're doing a ministry that has all these 5 principles, you're guaranteed that you'll move them.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. I love method. I think it makes everything so easy.
That's a good word, method.
Method. It's paint by numbers.
Yeah.
It's great. So we've run out of time, but thank you so much for coming all the way down from King City. If you'd like to find out more about the CORE retreat and you want to contact Father John Yake, you can do so by sending him an email to john_yake@villanova.college.org. And if you're interested in his book, go to the publisher's website, melonpress.com. And of course, if you'd like to reach us for anything, to comment on anything you've heard on this show, to ask any questions or for any information, do send us an email, focus@saltandlighttv.org, or send us a good old-fashioned letter, Salt and Light TV, 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C1P1. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Focus.